Tonight, your challenge is to separate what is true from what is false. Some real, some fake. Can you judge which are fact and which are fiction? To find out, you must enter a world of both truth and deception. A world that is beyond belief.
On October 31st, 2004, it was reported that 6 young adults had perished in the Ukava mountain pass in the northern wilderness of Finland. News reports excerpts stated, 4 males and 2 females tragically lost their lives following an expedition, made the discovery of 50 kilometers southeast of Ivalo, or believed to have perished following unfavorable weather conditions. The news reports did not delve into the details regarding the specifics of the tragedy. Grieving family and friends of the deceased were informed by investigators that the group had gotten into difficulty during the early hours of Wednesday, 27th October, after a small avalanche descended onto their camp. Death was caused by hypothermia, in all cases with the exception of Ani Jaharvinen, whose demise was found to be the result of cerebral hemorrhaging caused by blunt force trauma to her right temporal bone. This was attributed to debris, possibly a large rock or tree branch, propelling at speeds through the avalanche. No further details were disclosed. Authorities and law enforcement officers found the ruined camp after being made aware of potential missing persons by concerned friends, who informed them that the group had failed to contact them on neither the 29th nor 30th of October to confirm that they had returned safely from the wilderness. The 6 deceased were transported to their respective homes to be claimed by their immediate kin. All 6 transported in closed caskets were remained closed. Authorities cited the poor conditions of the body, exposed for far too long to the relentless elements before discovery, as for the reasoning behind this. Many people were on the belief that the body should have in fact been preserved in good condition, but the stricken emotions of the bereaved meant that they did not voice any objections and caused further stress. The bodies were buried, and tragedy rescinded into memory for all but the closest family members. It has since been discovered that this information does not amount to the full story of what occurred on that fateful night. Withheld information and retrospective investigations, the results and conclusions of which were secreted away in the archive until now, paint a very different picture of the events which occurred. Presented for your consideration are those missing facts, alongside conjectures and suppositions designed to recreate, in so much as possible, the true nature of the circumstances which transpired on October 26th and 27th, 2004, on the Ukava Pass. The 6 deceased in question are Manu Okkanen, 23, studied for an MA in Architectural Design; Lempi Litmanen, 19, studied for a BA in Finnish Language; the aforementioned Ani Jaharvinen, 20, studied for a BSc in Geology; Jacques Illevis, 20, also studied for a BSc in Geology; Rain Jaharvinen, 20, studied for a BSc in Electrical Engineering; and Ollie Adland, 21, a Norwegian who studied in the School of Medicine at the University of Tampere. Manu, Lempi, twins Ani and Rain, and Jacques, an Estonian national, all studied at the University of Alu. Subsequent interviews conducted among staff and students of both universities have been used herewith to help piece together the components of the bizarre puzzle and the conjectures which would follow in due course. All 6 students lived in their respective campuses and all long distances away from the families. The funerals afforded the authorities time for unofficial searches of their dorms and to conduct interviews away from the watchful gazes of inquisitive families, some unsatisfied with the information released to them. It also allowed authorities to complete their investigations of the dorms of the deceased before relatives were afforded the opportunity to claim the possessions of the dead. Certain known possessions, including diaries, were never claimed by the families and have never been accounted for. The 5 attendees of the university were of a tight-knit group. They were popular among their peers, with the exception of Jacques, who had Gothic tendencies which were the subject of some ridicule by other students, and they spent much of their leisure time together. They were an active bunch, fond of pursuits including hiking, skiboarding, rock climbing, and abseiling. Weekend sojourns to locations suited for those activities were a common occurrence for the 5. Analysis of evidence has revealed that between the 12th and the 15th of October, a 6-day-long trip to coincide with the midterm break was planned. The trek was to commence on the 23rd of October, with the group due to return to the university on the 29th of October. The five diligently planned their junket. They were experienced adventurers and were only too aware of the potential dangers that awaited them. They laboriously planned every aspect of their trip and inventoried absolutely all equipment and gear which was to be taken on the trip. On the 15th of October, Manu Okinen received an email from Ollie Adland. The two were good friends from Ollie's time at the university, where Ollie studied for 1 year before relocating to the University of Tampere. At the time, before the other deceased members commenced third-level studies, both Manu and Ollie were integrated into a large fraternity who liked to make the most of their weekends, partying, pranks, girls, and occasionally sports. Manu and Ollie in particular, along with, had a passion for outdoor activities. Manu's passion would eventually infect the rest of the Ukova Mountain Pass party. Manu invited Ollie to join the planned trip, and Ollie accepted. At 9:30 a.m. on Saturday, October 23rd, the Ukova Mountain Pass party convened on the grounds of the university. Ollie was introduced by Manu to the other members of the group for the first time, and they set off on their trip at 9:40 a.m. The intervening days between October 23rd and October 26th are believed to have passed without much incident, with one notable exception. The group traveled in their two cars and made their way north to the town of Ivalo, located approximately 500 kilometers away from Oulu. They arrived there 2 days later on October 25th. The group are known to have visited several bars in Ivalo before retiring for the night. It is believed that at some point, Ollie and Jacques almost came to physical blows. This is believed to have been caused by simmering, underlying tensions between the two. Ollie disliked Jacques' gothic lifestyle and believed him to almost be a homosexual. The situation was almost exacerbated by alcohol, and it is thought that Manu and Rain helped to maintain the peace. The group would set off the next day in a southeasterly direction. It was in this isolation that they intended to rock climb and snowboard. They also intended to spend their first day and only night outdoors. The group are believed to have enjoyed a successful day of activities, and at approximately 4 p.m., they arrived at the Ukova Pass where they decided to set up camp. A forested area lay beyond the pass, but Manu felt that it was too risky to travel further for the shelter as nightfall was rapidly approaching. The campsite was made on the pass at the base of a steep slope with a river located 200 meters away and a few lone trees dotted around the pass. The group stayed together in one large tent, as the collective temperature produced by body heat was greater than if spread over by 2 or 3 individual tents. Digital imagery recovered from the scene showed that the group had a meal at 8:30 p.m. and sat around a paraffin lamp, proceeded to imbibe alcohol until approximately 11:30 p.m. The group sang songs and played games before retiring to sleep, most drowsy from the effects of the alcohol. The paraffin lamp remained illuminated through the night, and DNA analysis showed that Manu and Lampy shared the same sleeping bag and had sexual intercourse. It is presumed this occurrence was when the others had fallen asleep. Semen belonging to Jacques and found in the stomach of Rain indicates that they too had a sexual tryst, afterwards awakening briefly sometime between 12:45 a.m. and 1 o'clock a.m. At 1:58 a.m., an incident occurred which caused the entire group to suddenly evacuate the tent. It was significant enough to prompt everyone involved to step outside into estimated temperatures of negative 22 degrees Celsius without stopping for long enough to collect warmer clothing on the way out. They were outside for approximately 90 seconds before returning to inside the tent. Images found on Ollie's cellular phone showed that he had attempted, probably in haste, to take photos of Lempy, who appeared to be wearing only a brassiere at the time. His attempts were somewhat unsuccessful as an object, probably his thumb, partially obscured the lens, which resulted in partial images of her naked buttocks. It is believed that he snapped these pictures unbeknownst to Lempy or any of the rest of the group. Further digital imagery reveals that the group joked and laughed, possibly to brush off the incident, and seemed in high spirits before returning to sleep. The cause of this initial evacuation remains unknown. Analysis of the scene suggested that a light snowfall between 2:30 a.m. and 3:15 a.m. concealed most of the original tracks and footprints. It did not snow again between the time of the incident and the discovery of the bodies. An avalanche did not take place. This was a fabrication on the part of the investigators. At some time between 3:25 a.m. and 3:35 a.m., the fatal events unfolded. The body of Ani Jarvanen was discovered 20 meters away from the tent. She was found wearing a t-shirt, pajama bottoms, and one thermal sock. It was initially believed that she had fled from the tent in the darkness. She ran headlong into a single tree, fracturing her skull and fatally wounding her. However, an inspection of the ground showed that her footprints moved just past and not into the tree in question before falling from her injury. The injury stemmed from another source. The bodies of Rain and Jacques were found in each other's arms some 540 meters away from the campsite. They both died of hypothermia. Jacques wore only his nighttime attire and a bobble hat. Rain wore nighttime attire and also a coat and his unlaced boots. It appeared that he attempted to keep Jacques warm by drawing him into his unzipped coat. Further analysis of Jacques' body showed that he had sustained 2 non-fatal injuries, a broken rib and a severed tongue. It is believed that he unintentionally bit off his own tongue. Jacques was introduced to Rain through Rain's sister Ani, with whom Jacques shared his geology classes. Their sexual orientation and fondness for one another was never known by anyone, not even Ani. The body of Manu was found beside the partially collapsed and partially burnt tent. He wore only boxer shorts and a t-shirt. He, like Ani, died from trauma to the cranium. However, the trauma that he had suffered was far more severe. An apparent blow to the head completely caved in the left side of his head, knocking out an eyeball, most of his teeth, fragments of his skull, and a large portion of his brain matter. The cause of the trauma is unknown. Found embedded in the remains of his head was one solitary hair. The hair was 5 inches long and thick like that of an animal. The hair was jet black with veins of turquoise pigment running through the length of the hair. Scientists have determined that the hair is organic in descent and not man-made. The species from which it came is unknown. The body of Ollie was discovered in the river, some 600 meters downstream. He had drowned. He was found wearing a one-piece pajama suit, boots, and a trapper hat, as well as a zipper hoodie, which forensics later discovered both belonged to Ani. Traces of Ani's blood were found on the right shoulder of the hoodie. The hat had been severely damaged and contained Ani's blood and hair. It had also been determined that both Ani and Ollie fled from the tent in a similar direction. Ollie, who had picked up a hatchet during his escape, struck Ani the fatal blow with the blunt edge of the weapon. He removed her hoodie and hat and, donning both items to help maintain warmth in the extreme cold, continued his escape towards the river. Analysis of his footprints on the riverbank revealed that he had stopped, looked back towards the camp as if considering his options before committing himself to the plunge. He drifted downstream until the hood of Ani's hoodie snagged a fallen tree below the surface of the water. In darkness and panicking, Ollie struggled to free himself but only served to catch the sleeve of the hoodie onto a fallen tree. Trapped beneath the surface of the water, he quickly drowned. The discarded hatchet, upon which were traces of Ani's blood, was found discarded on the riverbank next to Ollie's footprints. The body of Lempi Litmanen was never recovered. No footprints matching hers were discovered at the scene. An inspection of the artifacts of the site by authorities who led them to believe that she was still only wearing a brassiere when she had disappeared. 2 weeks after the initial investigation, authorities covertly performed another search of the site. A severed hand was found in a tree 1 kilometer from the campsite. Many of the lower branches, up to a height of 5 meters, were broken. They were subjugated to an extreme weight or pressure, and the hand belonged to Lempi. Rigorous examinations of the tent and its contents were carried out. It was initially assumed that the partial burning of the canvas had resulted from an accidental overturning of the paraffin lamp as the ground rushed out of their headquarters during the second evacuation. This notion has since been scuppered by compelling evidence that suggests that Manu intentionally ignited the material by the fire, failing to take. The reason for the arson is unknown. Aside from minor burns and damage to doors, the tent showed no other indications of compromise. Authorities originally suspected that Ollie Adland was responsible for the gruesome events at Ukava Pass. However, whilst responsible for the manslaughter of Ani Jarvanen, he has also been eliminated as the cause of devastation. It has been established that he was the second to leave the tent after Ani and his tracks continued only one way to the river. Attacks from hostile locals or wild fauna such as lynx, wolverine, or bear have also been eliminated as triggers for the destruction. No foreign human or animal prints were found at the scene. The group also had a hunting rifle, licensed to Manu, who was a very capable hunter. and 2 Bowie knives within the tent. It would appear that no attempt was made to utilize these weapons for self-defense, despite the fact that they were close at hand. In fact, the only item missing from the tent was the hatchet. The last piece of evidence presented at the scene was a claw mark which ripped through the inner door of the tent. The claw mark entered the door near the top and traveled downwards, leaving the material dangling in ribbons. The inner door was never unzipped, as the group was unable to move through the tattered remains of the inner door unimpeded. Again, officials had believed a carnivore may have been responsible for the devastation, but an inspection of the claw mark revealed that it had been one swipe made from an animal with 7 claws on one appendage. The door, while in its taut and undamaged state, was allowed for one swipe and no more. The presence of 7 claws ruled out any local fauna, which would have been at a maximum of 5. The lack of any DNA evidence also aided in eliminating a local predator, as the culprit as no hair, saliva, or anything else was found. The only item found was the unidentifiable black-blue hair on Manu's body. Ani was known to be the first to exit the tent during the second evacuation. She forced her way through the sealed outer door without undoing the zipper. Damage to the zipper, blood, identified as Ani's, on the zipper's teeth and a small, fresh wound on her arm confirmed this theory. What remains a topic of debate amongst certain authorities is the nature of the claw mark. It was determined to have struck the inner door of the tent from within. Ani Jaharvanen fled through the tattered inner door and burst through the secure outer door, and the others quickly followed. While the authorities do not know the cause of the destruction that night of the Ukova Pass, one irrefutable and disturbing fact remains. The attack originated from inside the tent. The Power Rangers franchise, known for its colorful heroes and action-packed episodes, has entertained audiences since its debut in 1993. The series has spawned numerous adaptations, movies, and merchandise, cementing its place in pop culture history. However, a lesser-known, darker chapter of this franchise surfaced during an internship at a major Hollywood studio. This confession recounts the discoveries made by Eric Whaley, an intern at Lookup Studios, who stumbled upon a covert project known as the Slayer Rangers. On August 23, 2015, Eric Whaley, a fresh intern at one of Hollywood's largest studios, was eager to make a name for himself and learn the intricacies of the entertainment industry. His tasks were mundane at first, fetching coffee, organizing scripts, and shadowing meetings. However, his curiosity and keen eye for detail led him down a path that he could never have anticipated. It started with an innocuous assignment, sorting through a stack of old scripts in the studio's archive. Among the familiar titles, one caught his eye: The Slayer Rangers. The name alone was intriguing, hinting at a grittier, more mature take on the beloved Power Rangers. The script itself was even more shocking. Unlike the family-friendly content of the original series, this spin-off delved into the darker themes, featuring brutal battles, complex character arcs, and moral ambiguities. Through the unveiling of this project, Eric's initial curiosity turned into a full-blown investigation. He began piecing together clues from various documents, emails, and whispered conversations. It became apparent that the Slayer Rangers was the brainchild of a group of rogue writers and producers disillusioned with the constraints of mainstream media. They envisioned a Power Rangers series that catered to an older audience, those who had grown up with the original show and now craved a more mature content. The project was not sanctioned by Lookup Studios. Instead, these creators had devised a scheme to finance the series through illegally associated funds, siphoning money from other projects to cover production costs. They planned to stream the show online, tapping into the burgeoning world of digital media to reach their intended audience. Eric uncovered the existence of a hidden studio, a small, nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where filming was already underway. The actors were sworn to secrecy, bound by non-disclosure agreements and lured by the promise of being part of a groundbreaking, albeit illicit, project. Intrigued and somewhat terrified, he decided to visit the studio under the guise of a delivery person. What he found was a far cry from the glitzy sets of mainstream productions. The warehouse was dark and foreboding, filled with props and costumes that looked like twisted versions of the original Power Rangers gear. The suits were more armor-like, with jagged edges and darker color schemes. The actors, while committed to their roles, had a haunting look in their eyes, aware of the precarious nature of the project. Eric managed to intercept a meeting between the lead producers. Their discussions were candid, revealing a deep-seated frustration with the current state of the industry. They spoke of the Slayer Rangers as a necessary evolution of the franchise, one that would respect the intelligence and maturity of its original fans. However, their methods were questionable at best. They discussed the logistics of continuing to divert funds and the challenges of keeping the project hidden from the studio executives. One producer in particular seemed to revel in the deception. He detailed plans for an elaborate launch event, a covert streaming platform, and a marketing strategy aimed at cultivating a rabid fan base. The enthusiasm in his voice was chilling, giving the illegal nature of their activities. Through this revelation that Eric had learned, the more conflicted he became. On one hand, the passion and creativity behind the Slayer Rangers was undeniable. On the other hand, the project was steeped in illegality and deception. He decided to document everything, not just for personal records, but as a safeguard in case things went awry. And then, one day, everything changed. The studio executives caught wind of the unauthorized project. There was a sudden, intense investigation, and the hidden studio was shut down almost overnight. The producers were fired and the actors were released from their contracts with stern warnings to remain silent. The Slayer Rangers project was buried, its scripts and footage locked away in the studio's vaults, never to see the light of day. Official statements downplayed the incident as a minor cause of misappropriation of funds, but the truth was far more complex and sinister. Years later, whispers of the Slayer Rangers still circulate among industry insiders, a cautionary tale of ambition and rebellion against the confines of mainstream media. The project remains a darker chapter in the Power Rangers' legacy, a reminder of the risks and consequences of straying from the path of legality and transparency. In the aftermath, Eric remained with the studio. His experiences with the Slayer Rangers shaped his understanding of the industry. It taught him the importance of ethical practices and the dangers of unchecked ambition. As he continued his career, he carried the lessons of that summer with him, always striving to balance creativity with integrity, leaving behind thoughts in his documents indicating that those who seek to uncover the hidden truths of Hollywood should remember that most captivating stories often lie behind the scenes, where the lines between hero and a villain, fact and fiction, can blur in the most unexpected ways. In 1976, deep within the secluded woods of Chattooga County, Georgia, Dr. Charles Scudder and his partner, Joseph Odom, sought a radical departure from their structured chaos of modern life. Scudder, a respected pharmacology professor at Loyola University in Chicago, left behind a life of privilege. He sold his possessions, abandoned his academic career, and, with Odom by his side, set out to create a sanctuary far removed from society's expectations. Their vision took form in an eerie and enigmatic corpsewood manor, a 3-story brick structure built entirely by their own hands. Without electricity or running water, the house embraced simplicity, yet its interior was anything but modest. Filled with antique furniture, bizarre art, and occult symbols, the manor reflected the eclectic and unapologetically conventional lives of its owners. Of the manor's most infamous feature was the Pink Room, a hidden pleasure chamber perched above the chicken coop. Adorned with mattresses, whips, and stacks of pornography, the room embodied the couple's embrace of hedonism and their defiance of societal norms. Scudder, a self-professed Satanist, openly aligned himself with the Church of Satan, a philosophy of individualism and personal freedom rather than devil worship. But to the conservative residents of Chattooga County, the couple's lifestyle was a scandal. A gay couple, openly practicing their beliefs and hosting mysterious gatherings, quickly became the subject of rumors. The manor's isolation only added to its mystique, with the tales of black magic, wild orgies, and hidden wealth spreading like wildfire through the small, tight-knit community. By 1982, the growing resentment towards Scudder and Odom had turned dangerous. Two men, Kenneth Avery Brock and Samuel Tony West, became fixated on the idea that Corpsewood held untold riches. Brock, a local man who had briefly befriended Scudder at one of the manor's gatherings, was particularly taken by the couple's peculiar lifestyle. Their homemade wine, rare furnishings, and eccentricities convinced him that they were hiding wealth. Brock shared his suspicions with West, a man with a volatile past, and together, they devised a plan to rob the queer devil worshippers. On December 12, 1982, Brock and West set their scheme into motion, accompanied by two teenagers, Teresa Hudgens and Joey Wells. They drove to Corpsewood Manor under the pretense of visiting Scudder and Odom for drinks. Armed with rifles and fueled by a toxic mix of drugs and alcohol, the group arrived at the secluded property. At first, the evening seemed ordinary. Scudder welcomed the visitors, offering his homemade wine. But as the night progressed, the men revealed their true intentions. Brock and West demanded money, believing Scudder and Odom had a hidden fortune. When their demands were met with calm denials, the situation escalated into violence. Joseph Odom was the first to die, shot in the kitchen where he had spent countless hours cooking for himself and Scudder. Dr. Scudder, restrained and forced to watch, met his end next. He was dragged to the library where 5 gunshots silenced the man who had sought nothing more than peace and freedom. The murder shocked the community, and the aftermath unfolded with chilling swiftness. Hudgens, horrified by the events, came forward and confessed everything that she had witnessed. Her testimony, combined with the evidence left at the scene, led authorities to track down Brock and West, who had fled the state. Their trial became a media spectacle, drawing reporters from across the country. The defense tried to paint Brock and West as victims of drug-induced psychosis, claiming LSD had clouded their judgment. The prosecution, however, dismantled these claims, exposing the crimes for what it was: an act of greed, prejudice, and brutality. Adding to the tragedy, the defense sought to tarnish Scudder and Odom's reputation, using their sexuality, beliefs, and lifestyle as justification for the violence inflicted upon them. Yet, in the end, justice prevailed. Brock accepted a life sentence, while West, initially sentenced to death, saw his sentence reduced to life imprisonment after a series of appeals. Corpsewood Manor itself met a fiery end before the trial concluded. Arsonists burned the house down to the ground, leaving behind only ashes and scattered remnants. But the ruins did not rest quietly. Over the years, thrill seekers and curiosity hunters claimed that objects taken from the property brought misfortune, accidents, illness, and even death. A bizarre postscript added another layer to the story. Dr. Scudder's remains, sent to the tri-state crematory after the murders, became part of a later scandal. Years after his cremation, authorities discovered that the crematory had mishandled hundreds of bodies, including his. Today, the land where Corpsewood Manor once stood is overgrown, reclaimed by nature. The forests might be silent, yet those who visit claim an air of unease lingers, as though the woods remember the horrors that unfolded there. As far as anyone can tell, this is the only existing image of Kaylee Hudson, who vanished without a trace in the summer of that year, shortly after moving with her family to the city of Glendale, California, just outside of Los Angeles. The Huston family had moved from Shawndale, Arizona to California in May, to the house on Wesker Street. The house, a classic craftsman, was the oldest in the entire neighborhood, originally part of the housing development in 1933. It was smaller than the grand 5-bedroom McMansion that they had owned in Shawndale, but far more beautiful. The entire Hudson family had been excited for the move. Kaylee, 19, was the oldest of the 3 sisters. In Shawndale, she had always been the focus of much praise for her good looks, which many people encouraged her to pursue a life in front of cameras, maybe as a model, or an actress, or even possibly a newscaster. But Kaylee, an introverted and nervous girl by nature, had always been camera shy, and up until her senior year in high school, resistant to the attention foisted upon her. Kaylee was homeschooled and spent the majority of her time alone. This had all changed when Kaylee, encouraged by her sisters and her mother, auditioned for the local high school winter play. Though she was not technically a student of Fairview Valley High, Kaylee won the role of Hermione in A Midsummer Night's Dream and was allowed to participate in the play. The experience was transformative for Kaylee, who found that she loved to be on stage. She began to ask her parents every day to move to Los Angeles so she could pursue her career as an actress. Though it seemed an unlikely dream, Kaylee's change of attitude came at the perfect time for the family. Her father, Jay Hudson, was recently retired, and her mother, Diana, was between jobs. Her two younger sisters were both in the process of switching schools, and their family dog, Pepper, had recently been put down after she was attacked by a coyote or some other small predator in the woods. Kaylee had been the one to find Pepper, injured and crusted with dried blood and drool, her collar missing. Her throat had been pulled apart and one of the eyes torn out. And Kaylee had cried all the way to the vet, and the experience had rattled the Hudsons badly. Kaylee's new ambitions towards California were a welcome change of pace, or that would guide the family to a new beginning, and the decision was made to go west. The move itself had been frustrating. Several boxes had been lost, and Jay Hudson had begun his first morning in California in a 2-hour-long phone argument with the moving company, switching lines to yell at a man from the insurance company and then back again to accuse the movers of everything from incompetence to outright criminal theft. The women of the Hudson family had brightened their day by unpacking and exploring the new house. It had come unfurnished, other than a single landline telephone in a hallway downstairs between the kitchen and the living room. It was in fact on this phone, that first evening, that a single call had come through. Kaylee had answered it on instinct, though the Hudson family phone service had yet to be set up. The call had been short, and when she hung up, Kaylee said that it had been a wrong number or some kind of prank. Kaylee had said that the connection had been bad, as well as choppy, and that she had only understood part of what the caller was saying. Though Kaylee had attempted to move on from the conversation, the call had clearly upset her, and her mother pressed for more information. Kaylee said that the only thing that she heard was a very soft, very quiet voice, possibly a man, but gentle and near a whisper, repeating a phrase again and again. When Kaylee's mother later spoke to the police, she couldn't remember the phrase word for word, but said that it had been something like, "I'm reaching for you. I'm reaching for you with my little fingers." In the following weeks, the Hudson girls had registered for the local school districts, and Kaylee had gone out to meet with several commercial modeling agencies her mother had found in the Yellow Pages. Most of them were the kind of one-stop shops that were common in Los Angeles at the time. Photography studios with an agency or management arm attached, working directly for brands and catalogs. Kaylee did a single shoot with an agency called Tori Michelle Model Factory. In it, she wore new Kmart teen apparel, with the common practice being to photograph several dozen models and then send their photos in large batches to the distributor for them to pick up and choose. Kaylee was thrilled by the shoot and felt emboldened, making friends fast and several other young models in the waiting room, making plans to visit a local mall, the Glendale Galleria, that evening. Diana Hudson, excited to see her daughter's newfound outgoing attitude in action, allowed her daughter to go out, unchaperoned, but ultimately, Kaylee's anxiety got the better of her and she stayed in, playing board games with her family. It was at 3 a.m. that evening that the family was awoken by the sound of a dog barking from outside. When Jay Hudson went outside to check, he found a small red collar, torn apart and stained with blood, left on the front porch under one of the lawn chairs. This sparked a debate within the family. The parents believed that the collar must have been dropped and discarded during the move, and its discovery now was a coincidence. Kaylee's two sisters, both young, speculated that it could have been a coincidence, but Kaylee herself was uncertain that it was Pepper's collar, the same collar that had been missing when she had found Pepper, staggering torn apart onto the front lawn several months ago. Things became more complicated when Kaylee, in an effort to prove her point, attempted to locate a picture of Pepper. It was rapidly discovered that one of the boxes that had gone missing in the move was the one containing all of the Hudson family's framed family photographs, and another containing all of their photo albums. This meant, in short, that there was no picture of Pepper to be found, no evidence of the dog having ever existed within the family at all. Pepper had, in effect, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an illustration by one of the younger girls in her journal. This reinvigorated Jay Hudson's anger at the movers and the insurance company, and the mystery of her barking dog and the torn red collar was slowly forgotten as the family struggled to get back to sleep. Over the next 2 weeks, Kaylee repeatedly tried to bring up the collar, but Diana Hudson had thrown it into the garbage the morning that it appeared, and the rest of the family, unsettled by the incident, was eager to move on from the experience. A month later, and the appearance of the collar was mostly forgotten. In the morning of June 25th, Jay Hudson had contacted the Glendale Police Department to report that his wallet had been stolen. That evening, while walking home a long-awaited hangout with her new friends from Los Angeles, Kaylee Hudson disappeared and was never seen again. She was last seen leaving a Burger King on Brand Avenue at 6:35 p.m., heading back home to meet up with her younger sister to see a movie. There are reports of a girl matching Kaylee's description walking quickly, looking upset and anxious, from several eyewitnesses, but none of them could confirm that it was her. In fact, efforts to confirm these sightings were when, in the wake of Kaylee's disappearance, things became truly confounding. Glendale Police and the LAPD, as was common practice, asked for a photograph with which to identify Kaylee, only for the Hudsons to, with some degree of consternation, realize that they could not supply even a single photograph of their daughter. Homeschooled, Kaylee had no yearbook photographs. The entirety of family pictures from vacations and holiday had been lost in the move, and the single portrait that Jay Hudson had kept with him at all times had gone missing the previous morning, inside of his stolen wallet. The Hudsons, confused and upset, contacted Tori Michelle Model Factory, asking after the photographs from Kaylee's Kmart shoot. They were informed, to great distress, that the negatives and only existing copies of the photograph had been mailed to Kmart headquarters in Illinois 2 weeks prior, and since Kaylee had not taken a headshot, there were no photos on file. The Hudsons, at a loss, contacted Fairview Valley High, hoping to get a photograph of Kaylee from her performance in the class production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Furthering their frustration, they learned that the single large photograph taken of the cast and displayed in the auditorium had been vandalized in a student break-in that March. Half of the other photograph, including the portion featuring Kaylee, had been torn off, and the culprit was never found. The photographer herself, drama teacher Marcia Sims, had died of congestive heart failure in April, and most of her possessions given away through Goodwill, so any attempt to find the original photo negative would appear to be near impossible. Unable to supply a photograph, the Hudsons were forced to wait for the publication of the Kmart Teen Fall catalog that August. Bureaucratic red tape prevented the police from subpoenaing the full shoot from across state lines, and when Kmart themselves tried to inherently track down the rest of the photographs, 40 in total, they could not find them within the tens of thousands of photos submitted weekly for Kmart marketing purposes from agencies all over the United States. The Hudson family copied the single image of their missing daughter from the catalog and, months after her disappearance, were finally able to put up her missing photos. The single glossy catalog image plastered all over telephone poles and bulletin boards in Los Angeles, California. The single glossy catalog image plastered all over telephone poles and bulletin boards in Los Angeles County. Months later, years passed, and Kaylee was never seen again, and slowly the posters stopped going up. After 4 years, the Hudson family separated. Jay had become too angry, flying into rages, and had been involved in an obsessive litigation with the moving company, who he blamed for the disappearance of their daughter. Diana moved with the girls back to Shawndale, and then in with their ailing mother in Florida. Gina Hudson, Kaylee's youngest sister, died of an overdose in 2007. Paula, the middle child, now takes care of Diana, who fell ill with Alzheimer's in 2010. Sometimes, late at night, Diana will mistake Paula for Kaylee and can be found in the front yard of their Tampa, Florida home, calling out for their dog Pepper. The 40 original photographs of Kaylee have never been found, and in November of 2013, a break-in was reported at the home of Andrew Michelle, son of Tori Michelle, and now the owner of the still operational Tori Michelle Model Factory. At first, it appeared to be an intentional robbery, but the type of damage that was reported was more in line with a small animal, with something having torn apart dozens of old files in the storage unit. Nothing was reported stolen, and to this day, Andrew Michelle and the LAPD assume that it was a raccoon. Now, with the liquidation and closing of Kmart stores throughout the country and the collapse of the brand, one can only assume that those photographs, as well as their negatives, will have to be moved out to storage somewhere. And it is for that reason that I ask for your help now. That they have to be out there, somewhere. The pictures. My pictures. The one picture. The original. Of the Kmart catalog photograph. You can help find it. If you or anyone that you know has information on how to locate the originals or the rest of the Kmart shoot, please contact me as soon as possible, as I am eager to find them. Stop keeping it from me. I need it, the photograph. There are, of course, digital copies, but those don't matter as much as they aren't as reliable. You see, I have all of the others you see. I have them all. And Kaylee, too, just needed that last photograph. I want it. And when I get my little fingers on it, she'll have vanished without a trace.